Welcome to another edition of Cheers to Careers. I'm Steve Ridinghouse, the Career Outreach Coordinator at the School of Journalism and Mass Communications at KU. Hello, we are back for another episode of Cheers to Careers. This is episode number 97. I'm Steve Ridinghouse, the Career and Outreach Coordinator for the KU School of Journalism and Mass Communications. Today we are joined by KU alum Jennifer Sykes. She's a Communications Director at Health Forward Foundation. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
So, looking at your bio, you've been there for 18 years. So what has your primary responsibility been? I know you've kind of evolved over time. So what is your day-to-day or month-to-month like?
So when I started, the foundation was a year old. We were formed from the sale of Health Midwest to the HCA hospitals. So when that happens, it's called a health conversion sale, and there's a lot of money that goes back to the community. So it started our foundation. We grant make to different health-related causes throughout the Kansas City area. And when I came on board, they had no logo, they had no website, they had nothing. So it was starting everything. Back then, it was actually the Healthcare Foundation of Greater Kansas City. Not my name. The then governor, Jay Nixon, gave that name to the foundation. So one of my first goals was to rebrand it with a name that wasn't the Healthcare Foundation of Greater Kansas City. It took me 10 years, but we eventually rebranded to what is now the Health Forward Foundation. But most of my day-to-day work, it's evolved over time. A lot of it is communicating to our nonprofit organizations about funding opportunities. We fund a lot of media, so I work with a lot of our media partners throughout both the state of Missouri and Kansas. We do a lot of policy work, so I am involved in that with our lobbyists and with our policy team. We've run some initiative petition campaigns, so have been part of that. So it looks different every day. This time of year, it's heavy around the policy.
Right.
Right now, it's heavy on federal policy because there's a lot of changes happening that are affecting our organizations that we fund. So
now, when you took this job, was that part of the appeal to it, that you could have a lot of say in the development of this organization?
Yes, it was. I had come from a large hospital system with 5,000 employees. There were, I think, 8 people at Health Forward when I joined. So it was kind of like that fun startup feel, which was quite different than what my experience had been at that point. But definitely that, and I had just started having children, and I was looking for a job that was afforded me a little more work-life balance. Wow. So that also, and I was very passionate about healthcare. But I didn't necessarily want to work in a hospital environment anymore. So this allowed me to still kind of live out my passion, but in a different way.
What's the attraction to healthcare? Is it just great stories to tell, or what pulled you into healthcare communications?
Good question. So I actually have a funny story about that. When I was a student here, I had Ted Fred as one of my professors. And I worked in the sports information office. And I wanted to do college athletics and sports media, and that was it. There was nothing else I was considering doing for a career path. And he kept pushing me to consider other options, and he's like, what about healthcare? And I remember laughing at him thinking, I would never do healthcare. That sounds so boring. But after I left college athletics, I think I liked the pace, the work, working at a hospital is not exactly like the ER or similar TV shows, but it's similar. There's something new and different going on all the time. There's so many different types of professionals that you work with. I like that busy pace. Right. I also came from a family. My dad was a social worker. My mom was a special ed teacher. I kind of grew up in a very progressive house that did a lot of work in the community, and so being in that nonprofit space was really interesting to me, and feeling like what I was doing each day was really impacting my community. So that is kind of an attraction that brought me and kept me in healthcare. And
how big is your communications team?
We are now a team of 3.
Okay.
So not big. I think Health Forward has around 40. We've grown to about 40 employees. Okay. Our team's 3. It was just me for 12 years.
Wow.
I have a generous budget, a lot of freelancers and consultants that we work with. Hired someone 7 years ago, and then just last year hired a 3rd person.
Okay.
So yeah, still a small team.
So the other 2 members, what were kind of their primary roles? I mean, I assume you have different strengths for your team.
So we have one person that handles our social media, our digital marketing, website, Then Ross and I, he's our communications specialist. We kind of split up the work amongst our, so we have 4 teams. They're
Okay.
called People, Power, Place, and Platform. Those are the 4 areas we fund. So he and I kind of think of it a little bit like a PR firm where we each have our beats, or
Right.
our clients. He works in the Place team and does a lot of homeownership work. He worked with our Power team, which does a lot around voting registration and civic engagement. I work with our People and Platform team, so we kind of handle all the communications needs for those areas.
Okay. And how do you think, I guess, going back, you talked about early on, didn't even have a logo. So I think you've been involved in like logo development, website development, strategic communications. Do you like being involved in so many different things? I mean, does that keep you
Yes.
motivated?
Yes.
Does it?
Yes. I like the fact when I come in, I mean, it's funny because I'm not, if you had asked my husband, I'm not very adaptable at home. If plans change for the evening and he's not home exactly when he says he is, same with my kids, I get very frustrated. But at work, like, I kind of like the unpredictability of the job. And when I start the day, I might have 4 or 5 meetings and a to-do list, and I may never actually make it to a meeting or hit because something's come up. But that keeps it exciting.
Right.
I think that's why I've stayed there 18 years. Is it every year it's doing something different. It kind of almost feels like I've had multiple jobs within that 18 years.
Nope, I can relate to that. How do you think health communications, is it different than other industries in terms of like communications, or are they all kind of the same type of flow, or just like the different focus? I mean, is there anything different about health communications compared to, say, like you talked about, like sports communications?
I mean, I only have sports to compare it to.
Right.
Sports, I'm very deeply passionate about both. And, but at the end of the day, sports to me was entertainment. And for me, healthcare is more meaningful. And I think that's, if I'm going to spend time away from my family, I want it to be something that has a little bit more impact. And so that's, I think, what drew me there compared to athletics. I like the fast-paced nature of both. The struggle with healthcare communications is it's a complicated field. I mean, you've got, if you're talking medical stuff, medical research, you've got a lot of, educators and doctors, and we all know that doctors don't use a lot of, easily understood language. So there's a lot of challenges in communicating in that space, but it's also a complicated system. You're dealing with Medicare policy and Medicaid policy, and, how does that get funded at a federal level and a state level, payers. Everything about the healthcare system is so complicated that it is challenging to find different ways to make that easily understandable to the people that we're trying to reach out to. And we have very varied audiences. So some of our audiences are people that work within healthcare. So like we can nuance our communication to be different for them than we would if we're just talking to an elected official who honestly is new and doesn't even know the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. We've got to really nuance than how we talk about our work.
And I would think with, kind of the new like political climate, it's probably even more challenging communicating and how things are changing and trying to be on top of all that.
Yeah, term limits at the state level on the Missouri side make it very challenging because once you really feel like you have a legislator that understands their community and different impacts of like not expanding Medicaid on your rural hospital, then they leave. And then you have to like start all over again with the next person, or the administration leaves and the people within the administration go with it, and then you're just back at square one.
And I know you were at the Truman Medical Center. I think you did media relations and I think corporate creative design. What was that experience like? How did that kind of prepare you for what you do now?
It was exciting. I pretty much went to Truman. I had a little stop from sports, and I didn't honestly think I probably would stay there long because I thought it was going to be too boring for me, and it was not at all. In fact, my first 2 weeks there, we had national media in 4 times to do stories. So we had a visit by Jimmy Carter and his wife in that time. So I mean, Hillary Clinton came. Like it was like, oh wow, okay, like this is an exciting job. So I think what working at Truman really helped me understand. I really definitely understand the healthcare system in an entirely different way than I would have had I not worked there, and the different types of people that encompass, a hospital. And my daughter was just recently in the hospital, and I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely know the difference between this person, this CNA is coming in to do this, and then I have an RN coming to do this. So that's due to my time at Truman. The other thing that I think Truman serves a lot of low-income populations in Kansas City. It's not a public hospital, but it serves as the public hospital in Kansas City. And I think what, for me as a white woman growing up in like Pittsburgh, Kansas, I really realized my privilege and how lucky I was growing up, how much things like access to transportation, access to healthy foods, having a safe place to live, matter to your health and matter to our community's health. And so that really shined that light working at Truman and seeing that that our patients' struggles weren't just fixed by a prescription or surgery or procedure, that it was much greater than that. And that kind of then led me to some of the policy work that we do at the foundation. Okay. But that experience at Truman, having that kind of lived experience through someone else and getting to see that, it changed the course of what I think I wanted to then do for the rest of my career.
And I think before then, you're Sunrise Medical.
Yes.
As a marketing coordinator.
Yes. Sunrise Medical was they sold wheelchairs and other assisted living devices. I worked with their Paralympic team, so it was still kind of adjacent to athletics in a different way. It wasn't college or professional athletics, but we worked with a lot of the Paralympic athletes and helped create equipment for them to use to compete. And so I handled a lot of their publicity that was during with the Paralympics in Sydney. And so I didn't go, unfortunately, but I was able to help do a lot of the marketing and PR for those product lines. It was a interesting experience, and it was a great organization and great people. The athletes were incredibly inspiring to work with, but it also made me realize I did not want to work in a corporate venue. So it helped me understand that.
So before your current role, when you're taking on those early positions, did you have a plan in place? Were you just trying to soak up as much as you can to figure out exactly what you wanted to do, or did you have a plan, I guess, when you graduated from KU?
My plan when I graduated KU was I worked in the sports information office as a student assistant, and I had intended to spend most of my career in sports. I really didn't, despite what my professors told me. And I was a biz comms major, so it definitely prepared me for what ended up being my career, but I really thought that I would stay in sports. But I chose not to. My husband was a basketball coach, so both of us working in that line of work was a little difficult. We didn't see a lot of each other. So I made the decision to leave and try a different field.
And you did have an internship with the Western Athletic Conference. So where would that have been based out of?
Denver.
That was in Denver,
Denver, Colorado.
That's a good place to be.
Yes.
And was that like a year-long, a semester internship?
No, it was paid. I stayed there for 2 years.
Oh, wow, 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was there for their inaugural season. The WAC was the first athletic conference to expand. They were considered the first super conference.
Okay.
They were 16 teams, and I remember working there at that time during that expansion year, all the media interviews with all of our teams talking about how crazy this conference was for having all these teams from all these different states and all these different time zones, and how are you going to manage that? And we didn't. After 2 years, 8 of the teams left and formed the Mountain West Conference. So that was an interesting time, and it is interesting now because now here we are, 25 years later, and we're back to super conferences again. So, but it was a really fun way to learn about athletics because I got to work with a lot of different sports that I hadn't worked with at KU. Water polo, wrestling, all the Olympic sports I handled, and it was with 16 different teams. So we get to travel around to a lot of different places. It makes it fun for me to watch NCAA tournament because I still have a soft spot for the former WAC schools.
Pay attention to what they're doing.
Now a lot of them which are in the Big 12.
And during your time with sports information with KU, what sports were you involved with?
So I was the sports media person for the inaugural season of KU women's soccer.
Okay.
So I was with them and journeyed with them that first inaugural year, and that was exciting. I knew nothing about soccer.
So you worked with Coach Francis?
No,
He
it was
wasn't the first
Lori
coach?
Walker. Was
Oh,
the
Lori
first
preceded him.
coach.
That's right.
And I remember my first experience with her. A reporter from the Star came and asked her to like bounce a soccer ball like with her head, like
Okay.
which is done in soccer. And she said, "Would you ask Roy Williams to bounce a ball off his head?" And I was like, "Oh, I've got it in for me this year." But she was awesome. I loved
Fun.
working with her. She came from North Carolina soccer, which Mia Hamm was her
That's right.
teammate. Very strong program. She was really great. She was great to work with, but I knew nothing about soccer. So I spent a lot of time in the upper unair-conditioned part of the field house in her office watching VHS tapes of soccer, learning the sport to help me prepare for that year.
And one thing I've known about the communications professionals I've interacted with, it seems like a common trait or something they strive for is try to be calm under pressure. I mean, you're in a fast-paced environment. Have you mastered that skill yet, or is that something you've always had the ability to do, kind of be calm when things aren't going
I
so
think
smoothly?
95% of the time I master that skill pretty well. There are especially times like right now where it just feels like we're in a constant state of uncertainty with what's going on around us politically. It gets a little frustrating. So we all have our moments of like, I just want to go shut the door and scream for a second. But for the most part, yes. And I think a lot of that, and that's what I worked on before I came here, is like preparing for like potential executive orders that might be coming down the pike, and how do we proactively prepare for that so then when those moments come, we are able to remain calmer because we've prepared for it.
Yep. No, preparation's definitely key. I know you mentioned you're from Pittsburgh, Kansas. Do you have a KU? Are you from a KU family, or how did you find your way to KU?
Yes, my dad's a Jayhawk.
Okay.
My mom went to Emporia State, but grew up in Topeka, so was
Okay.
a Jayhawk fan. So definitely a big part of our family.
So you always knew you were probably destined to come to KU? There was
Yes.
okay, awesome.
Wasn't much of a choice for me or my parents, but no, I knew that's just where I wanted to come.
Before we move on to Fast Five, I know we're a couple of weeks from graduation here at KU. What advice would you have for soon-to-be graduates that might want to be in communications, especially like with a healthcare emphasis? Any advice you would pass along to them?
I would say just be willing to do anything and, like be that team player and jump in. I've had some people that have worked for me that have come in and said, no, this is what my job is, I'm only doing this. And they didn't last long.
Right.
So the people that I think have gone on and had great successful careers are those that are just really willing to jump in and help when needed. And especially in the early days of the foundation, like, starting everything as a startup, like that's an important trait. I would also say, if you're looking into going into the healthcare, like really concentrating on storytelling and how you can be that, when people are going through health situations, it's a scary time in their lives, and how can you be like their advocate, and how can you tell their story in a respectful, it's a personal time for a lot of people that you're going to be communicating with. So like really keeping that in mind, using empathy, just work hard, take risks, be curious. Those are all pieces of advice I would have.
Nope. Great advice. We'll have to give you the microphone for commencement day, and you can stand there at the stadium and give them a big speech. Okay, so yeah, Fast Five, just some Fast Five questions. So I know you talked about you were in Denver briefly with that internship. I think I read somewhere where being the owner of the Broncos would be your dream. So what did you think of the Broncos draft? Have you had time to evaluate? Did they have a good draft?
I mean, I kind of wanted a running back a little earlier,
Okay.
but it sounds like we got a good one.
Because was that their second pick? The running back, I think?
Second or third.
Second or third?
Yeah. Okay. I was surprised we got a quarterback, but I trust in Coach Payton and his team, and hopefully we got good ratings. So
they didn't stick with the hometown Sanders though. They didn't need a quarterback,
no.
I guess.
I was really curious that they might try and
Get him late.
get him late. That was such an intriguing. Wow, that
Keep
made
track
the
of it.
draft really interesting, didn't it?
And online, I was reading a story. I think when you celebrate your 15th work anniversary with Health Forward. You had kind of a freak neck injury. It sounded like a wind blew a pool umbrella into your head. And that sounds pretty serious. Have you ever had any other freak injuries? Or is that the freakiest one you've had?
I've had some weird things happen to me in my life.
Okay.
I stepped through a nail that went all the way up through my foot and got infected.
Okay.
And was on crutches for a couple months dealing with that. I've never broken a bone or anything that most people do, but those are probably my two strangest incidents, yes.
And how many offices have you had since working with Health Forward Foundation? I thought I read somewhere where you might have had quite a few.
We've had a lot. So within our first building, I moved 4 times in that building. And then we're currently by Union Station at 23rd and Main. And we are building our new permanent home on Martin Luther King Boulevard over kind of by Swope Parkway Health Center. So we'll be moving there next year, and that will be my 3rd, I guess, location at Health Forward.
Oh, that's location, not even offices.
Oh, yeah. Offices, I bet you. I've
Double
moved
digits?
At the current place. In fact, I was scared because I just was out for a month. And I was so scared I was going to come back and they'd move me because that tends to happen. But no, I think this is my 4th. I bet you I've moved 8 times in my 18 years there.
Wow. What is something you've learned in communications as a professional that you wish you had known while you were in college? Is there one thing that I'm a little surprised by this, or did you have it all figured out coming out of college?
That's a good question. I don't know. I would say the media always, it's interesting working with media and the way that the media ecosystem has changed. And like, I mean, I don't think this has surprised me, but just we didn't have websites and social media or any of that when I was a student here.
Right.
And so how the industry has changed, and like I grew up very media relations focused, and now I'm still trapped in what is traditional media. And so I think for me, like that has been an adjustment I've had to make, and probably the biggest surprise I've had. I wouldn't have predicted that like the mainstream media would have so drastically changed in my lifetime.
Yeah. Another thing, something tied to that, I think anyway, when I was at J school and working professionally in newspapers, you didn't really want to be part of the story. But now it's almost like you're a celebrity, and with social media and everybody knows who you are, where before it's like you didn't really want people to know who you were.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
So the KU basketball managers, which one is the best basketball player?
Jack Sykes, my son, the little redhead. They call him Little Red.
And how long has he been a manager?
He just finished his sophomore year, so 2 years. So
2 years.
2 years left.
And one thing and I assume he plays in those games where it sounds like KU managers must be pretty good, because it sounds like they win quite a bit in those pre-games with the other managers.
The managers play the other team's managers the Friday night or the night before, whenever the game is. So it's okay
to say your son carries that team?
No, I would say he would be upset with me if I said that, but he can hold his own.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
We have a lot of great players, and at one point this year I was a little worried they might all have to join the team. So. Oh
yeah, good point. Well, Jennifer, hey, I appreciate your time. Yeah. It's fascinating to talk about your communications career, and especially after starting kind of in sports communications. So I always like to close with the cheers. So episode 97, cheers, Jennifer. Thanks. Cheers.